Okay, well, welcome everybody to part 2 of Honest Conversations. Let's talk school and about your IEP rights. My name is Lindsay Garcia and I'm the Executive Director of the 22Q Family Foundation. If you see behind me, I decided to set up here. This is my makeshift classroom, as many of you probably have in your houses if you are starting with virtual learning. So trying to make the most of this experience, and hopefully you guys can carve out a little section of your house or have some space for your kids to try to have a little bit more of a consistent schedule and setup. So we're excited to be offering the second portion. We really are going to be touching on our recent call that we had with the Department of Special Education. It was a really informative call that Donna and I, as well as some other members of our board, were on. And so we're excited to be able to share all of that information with you. At the end of the webinar, when Donna's finished presenting, we'll again open it up for questions. Feel free in the meantime, if you have a pressing question, I'm going to be fielding those while Donna is presenting, and so I kind of will go in that order, and I'll save the questions, and then when it's question time, can ask Donna directly, because she is obviously the expert, not me. I'm more of the facilitator. And again, if you're just joining us, welcome. We're super excited to have you all here. So without further ado, let's get going. So to my little counterpart over here, wherever you can see her on your grid, Donna Cutler-Lansman, super excited to have you again. She's a wealth of information, and she's done a lot more research than I have on kind of the current status we have with the COVID situation and how it affects our kids with special education. So Donna, I'm gonna let you go ahead and share your screen and take it away.
All right, hang on here. Are you guys seeing my screen now? We're good?
Yep.
All right, so hi everybody. Thank you, Lindsay, for the nice introduction. And you know, I'm excited to be here again. I'm not excited that we're all in the middle of this COVID pandemic and things are as crazy as they are. But we are here for you, and we're going to try to inform you on what some of your rights are and what is happening around the country, and also how the U.S. Department of Education is handling this COVID pandemic, what kinds of supports they're pulling out, and what your rights are as parents of children with significant medical needs during this time. So very, very excited to be able to give this presentation to you. All right. So this is a beautiful park in Janesville, Wisconsin. If any of you visit Wisconsin, I would suggest that you go to the Botanical Garden in Janesville. It's really lovely there. And I just thought about this, just because your path is different doesn't mean you are lost. The foundation is here for you. We're in this together. And there is kind of a benefit to having a group like this. And one of those benefits that we enjoy is the numbers. We're a big force now. Thanks to the leadership in the foundation, there are a lot of us. There are a lot of us together in this community. And because of that, we were able to contact the U.S. Department of Education. We asked them for an audience, basically, and they granted us, which I was shocked, to tell you the truth, but they actually granted us an hour of a meet and greet with the deputy director and the director of the U.S. Department of Education. So we are going to give you an update of what that conversation was. We're going to talk to you about what other districts around the country are doing to meet needs. We're going to look at what your rights are, given that you have a child with special needs. Talking about how do I determine if my child is really making progress in getting what we call FAPE, which is a free and appropriate education. We're going to look at contingency learning plans. Some of you may have heard that from your districts. This is what's popping up because of COVID. Districts are pulling together quote unquote contingency learning plans, and we want to let you know what those are and what your rights are about those. We're going to talk about synchronous versus asynchronous learning, which are words I never heard before used in education before this virus, but this is what's being thrown a lot around, and I want you to understand what those terms mean. in relationship to your child's IEP and services. And then I also want to share with you the information we got about determining whether or not you have a right to compensatory education. At the end of this presentation, I have some resources as well that the U.S. Department of Education provided to you. And I hope that you'll take some time to take a look through some of those resources, because there's a lot there that I think will benefit the community. All right, so we did have this wonderful meet and greet. It really was an honor, and it was with the Department of Special Education with Director Lori Vanderplug and Deputy Director David Cantrell. And both of them were there with just us to answer our questions and try to help us understand what we could do to better meet the needs of our children, who probably many of them may not be able to return to school for the better part of this year, given the COVID situation and whether or not there'll be a vaccine. It's just very iffy in a lot of situations. Their insights really gave us clarity about what to expect, and really some insight in how we can work with the districts so that we can move forward. I think the districts are trying in many places, but this is a mess, to be quite honest with you. And I think we need to work together, but we do have some things to share with you as far as how to accommodate the kids at home and how to advocate for your child's rights. And I would like to just give a shout out to Lindsay and the board, Kapil and the board, and Ryan and the board of the 22Q Family Foundation, really for pulling together this foundation, because of their leadership and, you know, the generous donations from a lot of you that are on this call. You know, our numbers in this foundation have grown tremendously. And when I reached out to the U.S. Department of Education and I said on behalf of the Family Foundation and talked to them about the thousands of families that are registered through the foundation, they listened and they were willing to meet with us. So there is really a shout out, and I'd like to thank Lindsay and the board there for their leadership in pulling this all together.
I am here.
First of all, the very first thing that they said, the first thing that was out of their mouths, is that the district must provide a free and appropriate education for children with special needs during this pandemic. So there has to be a workable IEP in place at the beginning of the school year. So that's now, right now, there needs to be a workable IEP in place. So something that's going to work for your child, and the district has to provide what's called a free and appropriate education. We have to be flexible. We have to be creative. This is going to be different in different parts of the country and different for all of us. One of the things that they were very clear about is that health and safety rules in your individual community will limit the options. So that is going to trump whether or not a staff member is going to be able to come into your house, for example. If the district is not allowing any staff to go see face-to-face with children, they could say to you that we are not allowing a staff member from our district to come into your home. That those kinds of decisions are state director decided, so it's by the state how they're going to handle this. It also can be locally decided. Now, I will talk a little bit about how we can advocate for maybe contracting out if the district is not allowing staff members to come in, if that's necessary. We can also talk about virtual options for one-on-one support. If your child has an aide, for example, how we can facilitate that or at least make it better during the pandemic. PPE equipment, including N95 masks and shields and ways to bring education to your kids, that's attainable. And that's attainable at a local level and a state level. And so, you know, that's one of the things that can certainly be asked for. Another thing that was discussed was home and hospital hours. And this was a very interesting discussion with them, because evidently home and hospital is dictated by every state differently. And going through the home and hospital umbrella in an IEP situation can very much limit the number of hours that your child may be able to get. So if they're on home and hospital and the state mandates, like the state of California, which I was at a meeting today, if you're on home and hospital, you only get 5 hours a week of programming, which to me is not enough. If you're virtual, which a lot of districts are saying you have a choice going in or a hybrid program or virtual, that 5-hour mandate does not count. So we have to be really careful if we pick the home and hospital option, if it's going to be limiting the number of hours that they will provide education for your child. Also, the home and hospital was never really designed for this. It was designed as an interim fix for kids that had surgery that couldn't come to school, or kids that were really sick and were not up to learning. Children right now with 22Q are not that sick. I mean, they're not sick at all. They're ready to learn. So they shouldn't have that limit of hours. So we have to be kind of understand the distinction there. And that was made by the director of the Office of Special Education, having come from Michigan. And she said it really is limited in her state. So that piqued my attention, because I know that home and hospital was something that was batted around for an option, but I would be careful about that. We also really need to rethink the virtual experience. We can make a lot more of this experience than a lot of districts are doing. It can be much more interactive, and these resources will be shared with you at the end of this webinar. Finally, something that was really brought home to us is the idea of compensatory education. Compensatory education in the eyes of the U.S. Department of Education is not a given. It's not an automatic. It is data driven. So it's going to be decided based on whether or not the kids did not make adequate progress during the time that they were shut down because of COVID. So we can talk a little bit about the kinds of data, what you would be requesting, and how this is an IEP team decision. Compensatory education may very well be appropriate, but it's not a slam dunk just because the kids were home during the spring. I just want to point that out. So, you know, I have the honor really to work with a lot of families around the country, and I can share with you based on my interactions what's happening. In-school instruction is happening with shortened schedules in certain districts. A lot of districts are doing this only distance or virtual learning. Some districts are doing a hybrid option, some virtual, some not. Some are giving parents a choice. Some are offering in-home instruction where a live person comes into the home to work with kids with 22Q. Some are allowing parents to opt for online, private, or public options. So they're saying, well, if we can't provide this, we can let you opt into a different program, and they're working with families to do that. I have not seen a district yet that's just opened its doors as usual. So this is very unusual for that to happen. And I think, quite honestly, in the districts that tried that, you know, they did it for a week and then COVID happened again, and you know, the kids are being pulled back. So I don't know if school is open as usual in your area, but if it is, that's not what's happening in most places. Home and hospital is an option, but again, as I said earlier, be careful about doing that. Other districts don't even have a plan as of today. So they're still scrambling, people are meeting, and they're trying to figure out how they are going to meet the needs. one of the things I noticed here in Wisconsin, I'm close to Madison, Wisconsin, and I have a fair number of clients in Madison, not with 22Q, but with other issues. And Madison has opened up to kids with significant needs only. Everybody else is virtual, and they've only opened it up to children that have to be in person to get their learning needs met. So I thought that was an interesting approach, only special education kids. And in that respect, only kids that really cannot benefit from virtual learning are being invited back into the school environment. So what are your rights given that your child really has special needs? Well, the IEP does decide what is an appropriate placement. And that is a team decision. The team has input. The district ultimately offers the placement. That has always been under IDEA. You have rights to go to mediation or to ask for a facilitated IEP meeting. If you don't agree, you can go to due process. You can appeal to the state. But usually that placement is a team decision. Now in our case with 22Q, some of that is a doctor driven decision, and most districts are allowing some level of virtual learning now. Districts that say you have to pick this plan or that plan, that's not really the way IDEA is supposed to work. Under IEPs, the placement can be fluid. It can be changed. It can be a program that is part in-person, part virtual. It can be whatever the IEP team determines it needs to be in order to provide a free and appropriate education for your child. So just because for the general population, they're telling the parents, if you decide on in-person, you're locked in for a semester. If you decide on virtual, you're locked in. That's not necessarily true for IEP students. IEP students have to have plans that are going to work for them to allow them to progress in the curriculum. It has to be appropriate. So, you have to be able to have a child that's going to access the virtual screen if you're going to have a virtual IEP. So if it's not appropriate that they can't attend, and you've tried a live person across rather than just a presentation, if you've tried a lot of different things, even a friend or a parent or somebody sitting with a live teacher across the screen, they're going to have to try different modalities to make this work. It has to be creative. It has to be flexible. But the district has an obligation to pull something together. They have to pull your child into an educational setting that is going to work for you and for your family. The decision to what to do on this placement and how to make the IEP work is data driven. It's a decision that is not just for the district's convenience. I was at an IEP meeting this morning where they unilaterally just decided to cut the time. And I said, why are you cutting the time? How are you unilaterally going from 5 days a week at 30 minutes a day to 4 days a week at 30 minutes a day? Why did we cut the time here? And they said, well, we don't really know. We thought, it fits in our schedule. I said, you can't do that. If this was what was appropriate before, as far as hours and minutes, this is what's appropriate now. I said, we're open to in-person and virtual for how you're going to meet 5 times a week for 30 minutes. It could be virtually with a teacher, but let's not just unilaterally cut the minutes. So this has to be sort of data driven. IEPs, for many of you were in place last year, and that's what your child needed when COVID started. So it should really be your IEP that's workable today should be piggybacked off what was currently in place before COVID. That's what was determined was your child's needs. Now, health and safety, and I understand this. I understand this as an older person, and I understand it given from, parents and you guys having, the health needs, and teachers' health have, their own health needs and their own family's concern. So health and safety overrides some of these placement decisions. They're not going to send somebody into your home if it's rampant in your community and they can't do this safely and everybody's in lockdown. It does, you don't get to say, well, I still need somebody coming in. I meant what might happen in that case is we can't meet your child's needs. Either they need to contract out, get the PPE equipment with the shield and figure out a way to make this work, or give you comp time later when this is safer. So something is going to happen, but they can come to you and say, I'm sorry, we can't send somebody into your home at this time because of the pandemic. So the IEP should be executed as it is written, unless the district holds an IEP meeting and asks for an amendment. Now, we all know we're going to need to be creative and flexible here. Most kids are not going to be able to attend to a screen for all day, nor do we want them to attend to a virtual screen all day. So we're going to need to be reasonable about what we're pulling together here. And we're going to need to be reasonable about the accommodation. So we might have different kinds of services. It might be teletherapy. It might be synchronous or back and forth learning, and intersperse that with activities that are guided by the school that the family completes. So we're going to have to kind of think out of the box here. But what you need to do is really have the district commit to monitoring the progress. So are they going to be measuring the IEP goals? How are they going to be measured? How are they going to report the progress? The expectation is that your child will be tested on their progress in a timely manner. I like progress monitoring. This is research-based. We should be monitoring how they're doing every week or every 2 weeks and adjust the teaching if they're not making adequate gains. Your rights also include the fact that if the district doesn't have the necessary supports for your child, that they're going to get it. They're going to go out and get necessary equipment like internet connectivity, that they're going to get computers, they're going to get Chromebooks, they're going to get PPE equipment, they're going to get subscriptions to online programs or whatever it is that is determined that your child needs in order for him or her to access the curriculum and progress in a meaningful way in their learning this year. So you do, as a parent of a child with special needs, come to the table with a lot of rights built in. And I know it's really hard right now to, pull all these things together, but I do feel that districts are starting to recognize that this is going to be long-term. They're going to have to rethink how they're delivering instruction, and they're going to need to step up to the plate differently than what they did in the spring. So how do you determine if your child is making progress and getting FAPE? You have to know that you have to collect data. The appropriateness of a program is not just somebody's opinion. It is data driven. So if your child knew 15 sight words at the beginning of the school year, if they're a little one in first grade and they know 15 sight words, at the end of the first month, we're expecting how much growth? Are they going to know 20 sight words? Or are they going to know 25 sight words? What is measurable? How do you figure out if there is goals, if they're meeting their goals in a meaningful way? And we want data. We want the school not to just give us, in my opinion, they're doing better, or statements like, oh, they're making progress, they're doing a good job. In this environment, we need statistical information in research-based ways. So assessments, there are plenty of math assessments, there are plenty of writing assessments, there are plenty of reading assessments. if you're looking at the strong academic foundation right now, that they can pull at the beginning of the year, and I would ask them for a baseline assessment, and then multiple times as this IEP is being implemented, after a week, after 2 weeks, what has my child learned? And I always tell parents this. I know sometimes it's hard to do, but keep data at home. When you're working with your child, you are in a great position to know that they're not understanding the material. They couldn't add within the group of 5 last week. They can't add this week. They still can't add. They're not understanding it. We need to give it a few weeks, give it a little bit of time. But if you're not making progress, we need to be changing. And I think they probably are going to need to add goals to the IEP, because now we've got social studies at home, we have science at home. There's a lot of these IEPs are not written with any of those goals. So I think you might want to ask the team, do we have goals in all of these academic areas? Because they're not going to be now in school in any of those areas. So what are the key things that they want your child to learn? What are the key concepts? And can we add some thought and some expertise into this IEP to make it a strong overriding IEP, given that they're not in school now for the whole day? So what is the curriculum? Now, every state, because of Common Core standards, should have state requirements, and you can find these on the Department of Public Instruction for your state. If you go there for your child's grade level, you should be able to find learning maps and state requirements for their grade. Now, they may be working on easier requirements, but it would give you at least a roadmap to understand what kinds of skills your child should be getting that year. And I think that some of these IEP goals might need to be tweaked to take a look at what those state Common Core standards are. And you're going to pick out 1 or 2. You're not, Common Core standards, there could be 20 standards. You're not going to have an IEP that's 400 pages long. But you can pick out some of these key things and saying, this is non-negotiable. In first grade, my child needs to be able to read. You could do it by a level, at level F by the end of the year. This is the standard. I don't want them to be able to decode 100 Dolch words. I want them to be able to give me who the character is in a book and what the main problem is in a story. But get specific, because you have to, if compensatory education is driven by data, and that's what we're being told, then we need to have that data to make a determination. So we need IEP goals that are measurable and that are strong enough to, to give some meat to the IEP. They can't just be flimsy goals. Do not agree to cut services or drop goals for no reason other than COVID-19. And that's exactly what a district tried to do today. And that's exactly what we said no to at the meeting. The needs did not change because of viruses around. If an aid was needed to assist your child before in a general education class, that aid is needed now. Now, the aid could be virtual. It can be in a breakout room online where it's just your child and the aide after a presentation is done virtually. But if an aid was needed before, how did it change that all of a sudden that aid is no longer needed? So that is really critical. Do not agree to that. You also can ask, how can that one-on-one assistance be facilitated safely? If you're going to ask, can somebody come into the home? Or maybe like Madison is opening the school up to children just with special needs. Is there a room that my child could go to in the school environment to get that help? If it's just your child, would you be comfortable with that? Now, some of you may have been given what's districts are calling like a contingency learning plan or a distance learning plan. And sometimes districts are providing that one-sided. They're coming to the table and saying, here's our contingency learning plan for our special needs children. It's kind of a one-size-fits-all approach. You should question those plans. These are not IEP driven. The plan should be an IEP team decision, and it should be tailored to your child's unique needs. You can take a look at what the district is suggesting, but it has to be tailored to what is in your child's IEPs. What I would recommend is a letter that's written to indicate how the plan really fits into your child's IEP. So one way to do that is to, have columns where you have what your IEP, all the modifications and everything that was promised before, and the contingency plan offer, and to see what's missing. If it's not syncing together, if there's gaps there, those are the things that you need to go to the IEP team and ask them, well, in my IEP plan, it said that all the work here is going to be modified in the general ed classroom. This didn't happen in the fall. Who's going to do that now? Or it didn't happen in the spring. Who's going to do that in the fall? Who's responsible? How am I going to get the material? When am I going to get the material? How is this going to be changed for next fall? And when I talk about modification of some of these general ed classes, to me, modification is not do one less problem. To me, that's just an easy way out. Modification should be, how is this material changed so that it's easier for my child to read? Can they pull out the key ideas? Can they give my child a different set of questions to answer? Can they modify the test to make easier questions on key concepts? Can they give me a different book to read that would give me the same information but would be at my child's reading level? That's modification. It's not saying, here, read the same chapter in the 7th grade social studies book that everybody else is, and you only have to answer 4 questions at the end of the chapter. When that chapter is really way above your child's head, they don't understand it. That is not a modification. It's kind of an easy way to say that you've been modifying. But in fact, what should happen is much more deep dive into the curriculum to make it accessible for your child. So in this letter to the school, you should indicate how the proposed plan will not meet your child's needs. Example, family doesn't understand the work, or the assignments aren't modified. My child doesn't attend to the computer. My child is refusing to work. My child's depressed. My child is lacking social interactions and is sad. What is not working about the proposed plan? And then document very clearly what the services that were before, what was provided before, and what is not provided in their new plan for you. And then request an IEP meeting to figure out how you guys are going to come together with what's missing, where are the gaps here, and where do you see this breaking down? And I would put it in writing. I would put it very clearly in writing to the district and make sure that they understand what kinds of things you're asking for. I have a very, very important thing to say to the community. Key lessons for kids with this syndrome have to be interactive, and they have to be done in real time. Instruction is not possible by just listening to a presentation. It has to allow for feedback, question and answers, and collaboration. So do not agree to the key lessons, which are your special education lessons, reading, math, writing. That cannot be what they call one-sided. And we'll talk about asynchronous versus synchronous. This has to be synchronous. It has to be in real time with a real teacher providing the instruction. So this terminology came about to describe virtual learning options. Synchronous means occurring at the same time. For example, what we're doing right now is synchronous. You guys are there. We're going to open it up to back and forth questions. I'm talking to you in real time. We're going to have that opportunity for give and take. Asynchronous will be when Lindsay records this and somebody's going to go on maybe at midnight tonight when they can't sleep worrying about this and look at the video presentation on their own. That's asynchronous. There's not a real person there to answer their questions or to make sure that they're understanding in real time. That's the difference. As much as you can get this program with the district synchronous, if you're going virtual, that's how you want it. It allows the child to get the help that they need. It pulls them into the experience. So this is really important. Zoom has all kinds of options on it where there can be smart boards on there. There can be, presentations that are pulled up. There's very advanced technology and platforms that are available to allow for a lot of this give and take. They can have breakout sessions with small groups, and they can have like a little chat room on the side that for just a couple students and an aide after a larger group presentation. So there's a lot of options there with assistive technology that would make the virtual experience richer and more interesting and more inclusive, and I think a much better match for kids with 22Q. So you might wonder, should I request an IEP meeting? And my answer to you is absolutely. I think this is just critical that you get an understanding in writing how this IEP is going to be implemented this year. Who is going to deliver services? How often is there going to be live targeted intervention? Will there be opportunities for a one-on-one small group? This should be at least 2 hours for at least 2 hours of this live interaction for most children with 22Q. What materials is the school going to use to deliver the instruction? How are they going to be tracking progress for FAPE and for data collection? How are they going to address my child's emotional and social needs? And how are all academics addressed, and how is therapy going to be addressed? And teletherapy can happen. It doesn't have to be therapy in a home or in an office. It can be over the internet. This can work. It's not perfect. It's not a perfect world. But I think that we can really do a lot better than what was happening earlier in the spring. So do you have a right to compensatory education? That really depends on what was offered. This is going to be on a case-by-case basis. If the school was closed for everybody, then the district's not obligated to do anything for special education students differently. But if the school did reopen in distance learning but did not provide the therapy or direct instruction that was written into your child's IEP, then it could be argued that compensatory education is warranted, or at least to look at whether it is warranted. But according to OSEP, the Department of Education, this will depend on the data. Now, I had an interesting conversation again this morning when compensatory education came up, and they admitted they hadn't collected any data. They have no data. They don't know how the child is doing because nothing was collected. So the agreement was that data would be collected right away in the fall. We would look at progress monitoring that was collected in February. We would compare those two things, and if progress was not made, that there would be an offer of compensatory education. So there has to be something to base this decision on. If you do get the compensatory programming, that can be tacked on to what kinds of things they're offering during the school year, or maybe it could be tacked on to ESY or additional help over the summer next year. But I think that's something that a lot of parents feel they should get. If your child was doing pretty well with the virtual learning and they didn't make they didn't regress or lose skills. Maybe that's not something that's important right now. They're on their path and you just want to move forward. What about therapy, aids, social skills training? If these are written into the IEP, the district needs to provide the services to whatever extent possible. It can be done all virtually. Private agencies can be enlisted. If they say they don't have a speech therapist with the school district, well, can they contract out for a speech therapist? Because health centers are doing teletherapy. So where else can we get the service if the school district is not providing it? Maybe they're overwhelmed and they can't do this virtual programming. So maybe another place can, like Fusion Academy or another virtual academy. I was talking to a friend of mine across the street from me who's a teacher in the district where I live. She told me that 800 students have pulled out of our district and are going to virtual learning places, they've pulled out. So I know that a lot of parents, even with kids that aren't special needs, are really scrambling to figure out what they're going to do. Now, you could supplement what the school is doing with some private things that you do, online and different kinds of programs. So I do think that, families are going to need to figure out what their, what is right for their home, what works for them and what works for their individual child. But a lot of companies are stepping up, like Khan Academy or the Alex program or, ABC Mouse. A lot of these places are pulling things together during COVID. Some of them are at reduced rates. Some of them are free of charge. So I would encourage that you kind of look online to see some of those resources. I would also ask for an assistive technology person from the district. There are specialists that can be utilized to try to figure out how to make distance learning accessible to your child. Some of the resources that I'm going to be sharing with you are exactly that, how to change the environment online to make it accessible. There are programs out there, for example, that can change the font on the screen. They can read the font, the words to the child. So for example, if you scan in a social studies worksheet of some kind, the computer can read it back. They can adjust the background. They can adjust the sound level. They can put definitions on there. There's a lot in technology platforms that are out there that can be used to help make what's online accessible. And I'm not a assistive technology expert, but every district has that. So you can be asking your district to try to get somebody on board to look at your child's IEP and figure out what apps would be appropriate, what online tools, what platforms can the district provide that would help your child be able to learn virtually. And there are grants available for technology for districts. I don't know how districts are going to handle all this money-wise. I know a lot of them are hurting, but I think there are some grants available from the government that might allow for some purchases. All right, so on the last two slides here, this slide and the next slide, I'm going to share with you the key resources that we got from the Department of Special Education in Washington. They've been really busy. I mean, I was pretty impressed with these websites. Because of COVID, they have pulled together resources because they're recognizing we're all struggling with this. And the resources, there are wonderful webinars on this first website that this is the Office of Special Education Programming. They pulled together a series of 3 webinars that gives great information on resources that have sprung up because of COVID. There are 4 kids with disabilities. There are behavioral resources, there are best practice resources, there are evidence-based strategies for special education instruction, and they're doing it all for distance learning and how to make this accessible for kids like our kids in this community. So I would strongly recommend that you take some time. It's going to take you some time to go through this because there is that much information there. But I found these webinars really insightful. They pulled from all over the country, leaders from universities and so on, with good resources and ways that you can go back to your district with tangible ideas of how to make this work. So I really would recommend that you take a look. The second is the National Center for Systemic Improvement. They have listed the state-by-state policies for guidance during COVID, so you can find your state and look to see what your state is doing for their particular special education programming. On there are also distance learning resources and also resources for how to do teletherapy. So if your therapist never done teletherapy, there's videos to train them on how to do teletherapy. So honestly, they're trying to put these resources out there, which I was really impressed by all that they have pulled together. The next one here is the Center for Positive Behavioral Intervention and Supports. So this website will help you get your kids ready to learn at home. There's information there about how to set up routines, how to set up a school environment, and Lindsay has done a fabulous job of that in her home. How do you deal with behavioral issues? How do you set limits? How do you get your kids to attend and take school seriously in a virtual environment? So that also has some really good informative information on there for parents of how to make this work. And then the final one is an early childhood assistance center, but it's not only for young kids. It's got a section on there on distance learning. And it really talks about platforms and approaches to how to make distance learning work for kids that are not attending a brick and mortar school. So these 4 resources, they're rich with information. To be honest with you, I was pretty overwhelmed going through them. There was so much information. I was pretty shocked at what they had pulled together, and shocked in a good way that they're hearing people, they're hearing the cries from around the country, and I think they're scrambling and really trying to post things that will help. So definitely take some time, maybe this weekend, to familiarize yourself with all of these wonderful resources. So finally, again, the 22Q Family Foundation is here to help you. We can discuss your particular situation. We can help you look over your child's IEP and try to figure out this distance learning plan. We can attend virtual IEP meetings to advocate for your child's needs. We can explore other options and learning that might be available in your area, and we can definitely help you research issues on your behalf. And again, I did want to make the statement, we are not attorneys. We aren't claiming that anything we're suggesting is going to absolutely work, but we're hoping to get ourselves as knowledgeable as we possibly can to bring back this information to all of you. So thank you so much, Lindsay, for setting up this webinar. And I think what we're going to do then is have live questions and discussion. It's kind of a